All right, welcome to Big Time Basketball, the basketball segment of the Fantasy Fanatics Podcast. I'm your host once again, James, and I'm joined by Nate and Mete. What's up, guys?
So,
how's it going?
All right, in today's episode, we're just going to talk about some news from around the NBA, just a couple signings. There was a trade that happened as well this week. And then we'll just get right into ranking our top 12 shooting guards for fantasy basketball. We'll just get in. It's an early rank about how we feel about these shooting guards. So we'll just give that to you as well. So let's just hop right into it. We'll start with some of the news. We'll start with RAJON Rondo, and he actually is returning to the LA Lakers. He ended up clearing waivers after he was traded to the Grizzlies, and he was then eventually bought out. It looks like his 1-year deal with the Lakers is worth around $2.6 million. That's the estimated amount. But Nate, I'll start with you first. I guess, what are your thoughts on this signing?
I guess it's a pretty interesting signing. So I guess there's probably going to be a lot of ball movement in this offense now.
All right. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of guards here. They brought in Westbrook. Of course, LeBron was playing point guard as well last season. So we'll have to see what happens there. I'll get to you, Mete. I guess, what are your thoughts on this deal?
I think it's a solid move for the Lakers. I feel like Rondo is going to go back to his role that he had with the Lakers a couple of seasons ago. With that being him coming off the bench, being their, I wouldn't say sixth man, but maybe 7th, 8th man this season. So it's a solid signing. I feel like the Grizzlies, if they held on to Rondo, they could have maybe got a 2nd round pick or something from a team, but I guess they really wanted to free up a roster space.
Yeah, I guess with all of these signings for the Lakers, I think, Nate, I'll ask you first. I guess, what's your opinion on them signing a lot of older players?
I guess LeBron-led teams, they usually end up signing a lot of veterans. I mean, a lot of these veterans in particular, a lot of them are really experienced. They've been around the block, and I guess in terms of ability, they're still able to play at a really high level. But I guess my only concern is maybe a few years down the line, some of these guys are going to start retiring. So they're going to have to figure out how to get younger guys on the team.
Yeah, for sure. I guess, Mete, getting to you. I know we noticed with the two teams in the finals this year, outside of Chris Paul, it was mostly a lot of young guys on both sides. I guess, what do you think about the Lakers now that they've had a lot of older players?
I think it's completely fine, honestly. A lot of the older guys they signed, they can still play, and they're signing them as role players. So it's not like they want them to be playing like they were back in their prime. So honestly, with them stacking up the roster with so much talent, I think it's gonna be fine. It's just like Nathan said, in the future, it's gonna be kind of rough for them. So after this season, even they got to figure out what they're gonna do for their future, as they're gonna need to sign some young guys or get some draft picks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of the young talent that they had on their team in the past, whether it was Lonzo Ball, whether it was Kyle Kuzma, D'Angelo Russell, whoever was there, I mean, all those guys are gone now. They've replaced them with a lot of veterans, like you said. It is tough when you're trading out all this young talent just to sort of stay in contention every year. Eventually, it's going to hurt you in the long run. But yeah, we'll have to see. Right now, the Lakers are still contenders, so I guess they're just doing whatever they can to just beef up their team. Let's just use that to get into the next piece of news, and that is the trade. It's actually a 3-way trade between the Portland Trailblazers, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Chicago Bulls. Let me just break it down. So the Bulls trade Lauri Markkanen to the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers then trade Larry Nance to the Portland Trailblazers, and then Portland trades Derrick Jones Jr., their protected 1st rounder, and Denver's protected 2023 2nd rounder to the Chicago Bulls. So Mete, I'll start with you this time first. I guess what's your opinion on the trade, and which of the three teams do you think came out winning this trade?
Yeah, so I think the Cavaliers definitely won this trade. They get a starting power forward with Lauri Markkanen, and he's still really young. He can space the floor, so he's got great upside. The Bulls, I think they got a decent return as well. They get a first rounder back at least for Markkanen, and Derek Jones Jr. will just be a bench piece for them. And then I don't really like this trade for the Blazers. I know Larry Nance Jr. is a solid upgrade over Derek Jones Jr., but they give up a first rounder for that, and I don't think it's gonna make them that much better.
Yeah, it is tough because yeah, they get Larry Nance. I mean, if Nance can grow into that guy for Portland, that can start, that can play really well. I mean, he has shown some signs of it. It's more of a development, if anything. Like as of right now, yeah, you're right. He's not that player that would warrant that kind of trade. But yeah, other than that, I think the other two teams did benefit. But I guess Nate, I'll get to you. What's your opinion on this trade? And I guess which of these teams you think won the deal?
Yeah, I agree with Mete. I think that at least I think the Cavaliers, they seem to have like the most upside from this trade. Lauren Markkanen's a really young player still. I think he's only 24. And they have yet another piece on their roster. And the Cavs are still a really young team. So we might end up seeing the Cavaliers maybe in the playoffs in the future if they pull this rebuild off. And I guess for the Portland Trailblazers, the trade kind of evens out. And for the Bulls, I think they kind of, I don't want to say like they got the least out of it because they did get a first and second rounder, but they're protected first and second round picks. So there's not really like a guarantee that it's going to work out. And they ended up getting Derek Jones Jr. But on the other hand, the Bulls have a really good starting five already. So they're not like in desperate need for like a really good player yet.
Yeah, I think the Bulls were pretty much trying to get as much draft capital as they could for marketing because everyone knew he was on the way out anyways. That wasn't a surprise. So of course, when you know a player's on the move, sometimes will lower the trade value. So I think they did pretty well getting back a good return. And then once again, returning to Larry Nance, he's got to stay healthy. If he stays healthy, he can definitely develop into a player that was worth making the trade for. But yeah, his health has pretty much come into question most of the seasons that he's played. So we'll definitely have to see with him on that. But one more piece of news we should get to: Clint Capella re-signed with the Atlanta Hawks on a 2-year deal worth around $46 million. So it looks like he did pretty well for himself. I guess Nate, I'll get to you. What do you think of this signing? And I guess what do you think of the Hawks as a whole?
I guess I think it's worth it to re-sign Clint Capella. There's not really too much to be said. Clint Capella is a really good player, and I guess the Hawks still should be a really good playoff team.
Yeah, and I guess Mete, I'll get to you. I guess what do you think of this signing? And I guess as for the Hawks, they started off kind of rough, but then they really built themselves into a contender last season. I guess what are your thoughts on them with both the signing and the team?
Yeah, I think this is a great signing. They're getting good value here. I'd say Capella, he's like similar role to Rudy Gobert. He's there to get a double-double and protect the paint. And if you compare the two contracts, Capella's contract is way cheaper. And so, like I said, I think this is great value. And to answer your question, I think the Hawks, with them being so young, they figured it out in the second half of the season last year. So I think they'll definitely get better this year.
Yeah, when I saw the contract, I was kind of surprised. I thought maybe around this amount of money, normally they would take the 4-year deal. And then if it was a 2-year deal, like you said, it would probably be a bit more money. But yeah, you're right. They did get a good deal here. And yeah, their entire core apparently is locked up until 2025. So that's pretty that's pretty good for them as well. They definitely can focus on, I guess, just, building their team into serious contenders. And yeah, if their team just keeps improving, I mean, this is a team that's going to be a force in the East. There's no question about that. So, yeah, I think that we've covered pretty much everything in terms of news. So let's just get into some fantasy basketball now. We're going to rank our top 12 shooting guards. I know we have different players in here. Most of them, I think, are players that we haven't mentioned yet in this whole countdown and ranking thing. So I guess, Nate, I'll start with you. Top 12 shooting guards, who's your number one?
I guess my number one would be Bradley Beal right now. He's the number one scoring option in Washington. He was playing with Westbrook last season, and he still got 23 field goal attempts per game. So I think his volume shooting is going to increase even more this season. And I guess when I was doing my list for shooting guards, I decided to kind of lean more towards scoring. Like there's some players that they have a lot of versatility, but yeah, I decided to lean a little bit more towards scoring for shooting guards.
Yeah, that definitely helps. I guess if you're in a points league, you definitely target the guys that can really get it done for you in terms of points. Yeah, I agree with you. Whether it's points league or category league, I definitely like Bradley Beal at number one. I think he pretty much provides like versatility for you as well. Like, he's always gonna have a lot of shooting attempts. I don't know. I don't think he'll tank a lot of his percentages, but it definitely helps you in terms of him getting a lot of points. And then obviously, just chipping in the other categories. I think Bradley Beal is just pretty much on a level of his own compared to a lot of the other shooting guards. But I guess I'll just get to you, Mete. Who'd you have at number one?
Yeah, I have Bradley Beal as well, and I totally agree with you guys with him being the number one option and Westbrook out of the way. I think he's gonna have a monster season. He's been a great scorer. He's averaged 30 plus points in the last 2 seasons. So, I mean, he's only lacking in turnovers and blocks for 9 category leagues, and you don't really draft shooting guards for blocks and turnovers you'll live with since he's one of the best scorers in the league.
Yeah, for sure. It just seems like he's primed for a breakout, like Mete said. I totally agree with that. Nate, let me get to you for your number two shooting guard.
So my number two shooting guard is Devin Booker. I think he's the number one scoring option in Phoenix with 19.2 field goal attempts. He was fourth in total assists, and he was second in total points for shooting guards. I think he scored 1,712 total points. He also got 67 games played, which I think would be good because you want like a top end shooting guard who's in for most of the games, because if you end up getting a guy who is only in for like 40 games, that's not really going to help your fantasy team. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, like you said, he's the number one scoring option there in Phoenix. Should definitely be getting a lot of looks. Mete, getting to you, who's your number two option for shooting guard?
Yeah, I also went with Devin Booker as my number two. Like Nate said, number one option in Phoenix. His assists have taken a hit since the arrival of CP3, but he's an elite scorer as well. And like Beal, he only lacks in blocks and turnovers, but he's giving you great value for 7 other categories. So, I mean, he's got great upside as well as he's only 24.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go a different route than you guys. I went with Zach LaVine at number two, and I guess I'll explain. I feel like that he's more of an efficient scorer compared to Bradley Beal. The only problem is how stacked that Chicago team is. So he definitely has to take a back seat to Bradley Beal. I still believe LaVine is the number one option there. Even when Vucevic went there last year, they were still featuring LaVine as the number one guy. With DeRozan coming in, that shouldn't change that anyways. Obviously, his efficiency is important in terms of percentages. Obviously, maybe not. Maybe the points won't reach the level they were last year, but in terms of other categories, he should be really solid. Yeah, I also have a lot of faith in him because people did think he was injury prone. He might still be a little injury prone, but I guess other than that, he has proved to be a little bit more healthy over the last couple of years. So I definitely think that you can lean into him. as this Chicago offense should be really solid next year. So I'm gonna go with Zach LaVine. But Nate, let me get to you for number 3.
So for number 3, I guess it's a little bit of contradicting myself by picking James Harden because he only played for 44 games last season, but usually he plays over 60 games. So I don't think this is going to be like a trend for James Harden being like injury prone or anything. And I guess if he was fully healthy, he should be able to finish top 3 in total points scored. And he was also 6th in rebounds. I think he was close to 1st in total assists, and he was tied for 5th in total blocks. So he has the potential to be the number 1 shooting guard if he's fully healthy, but he is sharing the ball with KD and Kyrie. I think his field goal attempts is like around 16, so it shouldn't be too much. Like it shouldn't be too big of a deal, but it's something that you want to kind of like watch out for.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that. And Mete, let me get to you. Who's your number 3 guy for shooting guards?
For shooting guard, I have Donovan Mitchell at number 3. I mean, he's the number 1 guy in Utah. He's been improving every year, and he only really lacks in the blocks department. Outside of that, he's an elite scorer and gives you great value in 7 other categories. And he's only 24, so he's got great upside and might get even better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Donovan Mitchell is a really solid player. He's probably the number 1 option on his team as of right now. So unless you're looking at rebounds, obviously that would be Rudy Gobert. But aside from that, he definitely is the top option there. For number 3, a guy I didn't include on my point guard list, but he does play shooting guard as well. That's LaMelo Ball. Yeah, I liked what Mete said last time about how he feels like LaMelo is going to break out. I don't think his points will reach, I guess, the totals that Bradley Beal and Zach LaVine will put up. But in terms of other categories, he's going to be really solid. He's pretty much close to a triple-double every single game. He's going to get you steals. He's tall enough. He's going to get you blocks, especially for a guard. So that's definitely something you got to look out for. Yeah, he's definitely a guy that covers all the bases in terms of category leagues. So I have him at number 3. Of course, it's a high expectation, but I definitely think he's going to take that next step this season. But yeah, Nate, let me get to you now. Who's your number 4?
So my number 4 is Donovan Mitchell. He only played 53 games and he ended up finishing 5th in total points. So I think he could have finished maybe 4th or higher if he played 60 games or more. And he was also 7th in assists. He ended up getting 52 steals, and he had 178 3-points made.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to agree with you on that. Donovan Mitchell is my number 4 as well. You pretty much touched on everything Mete did as well. He just covers a lot of the bases when it comes to a solid shooting guard. You're not going to find a lot of better players in the league. So he's definitely a guy. I know he struggled with his health for bits. He has been pretty consistent, though, in terms of his health. So you really don't need to have that much concern there. But yeah, in terms of just covering the stat sheet, yeah, he's pretty good at that for shooting guard. So I have him at number 4. But yeah, Mete, let me get to you for number 4. Who's your guy?
Yeah, I went with Zach LaVine here, and I pretty much agree with everything you said, but I feel like the addition of Lonzo and DeMar is gonna kind of tank his value a bit. I think he's still gonna have a great year, but I think the scoring numbers will kind of decrease. But outside of that, I mean, like you said, he's great at everything except for turnovers, really.
Yeah, he's just one of those guys that's very efficient. He likes to take the ball to the hoop as well, which is great in terms of his percentages. So you definitely want to capitalize on that when it comes to Zach LaVine. So yeah, I definitely agree that he's a solid player. Nate, let me get to you. Who's your 5th ranked shooting guard?
So my 5th ranked shooting guard is Zach LaVine. He has the potential to finish top 3. He ended up getting 3rd in total points. I think he got almost 1,600. He was like 9 points away from that. I think his points per game is like 27, and he was 2nd in the league in shooting guards in threes made. I guess I'm just not sure about how many I guess, field goal attempts he's going to get sharing the ball with the rest of the team. But I think in terms of how the team kind of fits, he shouldn't take like too much of a dip. I'm just not completely sure how big or how small the dip's going to be.
Yeah, honestly, it comes down to whether he can be efficient with his touches. It just depends how many minutes he plays as well. So, yeah, assuming we carry last year over to this year with his efficiency, I definitely think that he can be really solid. But from year to year, it's tough to say. So, yeah, I definitely like Zach LaVine as well. Mete, getting to you for your number 5, which shooting guard do you have?
Yeah, so I went with Jaylen Brown as my number 5. The number 2 guy in Boston, you can really tell that the Celtics missed him, as when he got injured, the team relied heavily on Jason Tatum and they weren't winning as much. So, I mean, he's improved greatly over the last 2 seasons and he's become a great scorer. Last season, he didn't really have a category where he struggled. So, he gives you great numbers pretty much all across the board and he's only 24. So, great upside still.
Yeah, for sure. Jaylen Brown definitely took that next step, and he's definitely a really solid shooting guard. For number 5, though, I put Devin Booker. I like his points output. I definitely agree that he is the number 1 option there. I feel like Chris Paul, though, takes away from some of his category value, if that makes sense. Whether it comes to assists and then obviously rebounds, that sort of Aiton's thing, and you got other guys there. So in a points league, I definitely would have Booker maybe a couple spots higher, but I think in category leagues, I would probably have him around 5th. I think that should be the right place to take him. But Nate, who's your number 6 for shooting guards?
I guess I might be going out on a limb here a little bit, but I put CJ McCollum at 6th for shooting guards. I was just mostly looking at scoring for CJ McCollum. He only played 47 games, but I think if he played like 60 or more, he could have ended up finishing 7th. And he is the number 2 option, I believe, on Portland. I think he got 18.8 field goal attempts per game last season before he got injured. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like he had kind of a down year as well. If he can definitely bounce back, I feel like that he could definitely reach that kind of range. It's just going to depend on how good of a team Portland is overall as well. So definitely take that into consideration. Mete, let me get to you. Who's your number 6 shooting guard?
Yeah, I also have CJ McCollum. Like Nate said, number 2 guy in Portland. But if Lillard were to get traded, I feel like his value would skyrocket. And but that's a different topic for another day. As of now, Lillard's still on the Portland Trailblazers. But like Nate said, he's a great scorer. Outside of that, gives you solid numbers for pretty much all the categories. Not the greatest numbers, but it's definitely solid for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It looks like Lillard is planning to stay in Portland, so that definitely decreases him in terms of not being the number 1 option. But yeah, he definitely should be a solid player for fantasy. For number 6, I have a guy I didn't mention on my list for point guards, and that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Mete, you mentioned it, how you believe he's one of those players that could really break out. On OKC last year, whether it was due to injury, whether it was due to them just not being in contention, he sat out a lot of the season. I definitely think this is a year for him to rebound. He definitely can become their number 1 option. He can definitely become a solid option for fantasy as well, as he was 2 years ago when he first broke out. So, yeah, shooting guard eligible, definitely a guy you need to take a look at, especially if you're looking for young guys that are going to break out. So, Nate, number 7, who's your guy for shooting guard?
So I guess for number 7, I have Jaylen Brown. I think he was 4th last year in total points. He got 1,430, 347 total rebounds, 32 blocks, 72 steals. So that ties him for 6th in the league with Anthony Edwards. He also played for 58 games. So he wouldn't have like too much more in his categories if he ended up playing 60 or more, but I think he's pretty solid overall. And in terms of getting enough, I guess, field goal attempts, I think he does get enough. he is playing with like Jason Tatum. The Celtics are like a really stacked team, but Jaylen Brown was still able to get his. So
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I have Jaylen Brown at number 7 also. All the things you mentioned, he's the number 2 option there behind Jason Tatum. When he was in the lineup last year, this Boston team looked a whole lot better than they did near the end of the season. He's definitely one of their main scorers. Like you said, he can get different things for you across the board when it comes to fantasy. He's just one of those guys, that you can just bank on. He's pretty much a lock and load starting shooting guard for you in your leagues. So he's definitely should be probably one of the top 5 players that you pick in your draft. So I definitely like Jaylen Brown. But Mete, who's your number 7 shooting guard?
I got Anthony Edwards at number 7, the number 2 option behind Cat. Edwards had a great rookie season last year, but he's going to need to improve on the playmaking, and his efficiency wasn't too great, but he's got all the time in the world as he's only 20, and I definitely believe in him.
Yeah, it's definitely another one of your sort of breakout players. I know you like to target a lot of those young guys that you think will sort of take the next step. And yeah, Anthony Edwards, definitely one of those guys. He had a solid rookie year last year. Nate, let me get to you for number 8. Which shooting guard do you have?
so for number 8, I have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think if he played 60 games, he could have gotten 422 total points or something like that, but he only ended up getting 830 because he only played 35 games. I think he also gets a lot of assists for shooting guard as well. The only thing I'm concerned about is the other categories outside of scoring and assists. But if he's fully healthy, if all you need is a scorer, then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a shooting guard that you'd want to get.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. He's definitely on my list in terms of shooting guards I definitely want to draft. And I guess Mete, getting back to you, who's your number 8 shooting guard?
Yeah, so I went with Malcolm Brogdon at number 8. He's the number 2 guy behind Sabonis, and Brogdon's been improving every year. He became a great scorer last season as it was his first season with 20 plus points. So outside of that, he's pretty solid in all other categories, I'd say, except for blocks. But like I said, for Beal, you're not really getting shooting guards for blocks.
Yeah, as long as he covers at least 5 categories, you're definitely pretty solid with him, I think. Just getting to my number 8, I have Drew Holiday here. I didn't include him in my point guards, so I'm going to include him here. Obviously, he's really solid. He's a scorer. He can get around 7-8 assists per game, just depending on his role. He'll chip in other categories as well as percentages are solid. He'll chip in with steals as well. Maybe get a block here and there. His turnover rate is pretty low compared to a lot of the other guards. He definitely does a good job protecting the ball. So yeah, he's definitely someone I would have on my draft radar list. I know some people wouldn't take him as high, obviously in points leagues and obviously in other leagues, but I guess in terms of 9 category, I definitely like his appeal. He definitely seems like either the second or third option there in Milwaukee, and they're a high scoring team. So you don't really need to be afraid that he's not going to be getting the stats, as he's definitely going to be, getting a lot in that offense. But for number 9, Nate, which shooting guard do you have?
So I have Anthony Edwards at number 9. His, I guess, overall stats were really good. His availability is really good. He ended up playing 72 games. But I think, like you guys said, in terms of efficiency, I think that if other players were also fully healthy, I'm not sure if I would pick Anthony Edwards over somebody like that I ranked higher, even though Anthony Edwards is most likely going to be fully healthy next season.
Yeah, for sure. That Minnesota offense, I guess, just needs to grow. Like you said, there were injuries, there were other things. So hopefully, yeah, the offense can grow, and then he should grow right alongside of it. But I guess getting to you, Mete, who do you have at number 9?
Yeah, so for number 9, I went with Anthony Edwards's backcourt partner, and that's D'Angelo Russell. For Yahoo leagues and ESPN, I believe he's shooting guard eligible, and he's a number 3 option, I'd say, behind Edwards and Cat. He's coming off an injury-riddled season, but with the departure of Ricky Rubio, he should be the starter once again, and that's great for his fantasy value. He had pretty much solid numbers all across the board, except for rebounds, I'd say.
Yeah, he's definitely a solid player. We'll have to see who gets more usage between him and Anthony Edwards. I know Edwards is sort of that higher draft capital, but then with D'Angelo Russell, he's more of the proven player. So that's definitely something that we can watch out for. For number 9, I had CJ McCollum. I guess from the year he had last year, I have some issues with him, especially since Damian Lillard is still there. And it looks like a lot of that offense took a downgrade from last season. So I think that might tank his fantasy value a little bit, but other than that, he's pretty much as solid as it gets in terms of consistency. He can score. He gets some assists here and there. His threes haven't been as consistent as they were previously, but he can still shoot the three really well. Yeah, he pretty much covers different categories that you might need in category leagues. So yeah, he's definitely someone that I'd look at as a solid shooting guard. But Nate, let me get to you. Who's your number 10?
So for number 10, I have Karis LeVert. He's a player that he fills out a lot of categories. I think in terms of scoring, he's not necessarily like a top end scorer, but he's still really good. I think the biggest concern is his injury history. He only played 47 games last season, and a lot of his games over most of the regular seasons in the past have been under 60 games for the most part, other than 2018 in Brooklyn, where he played 71 games. So I think that's something that you might want to be concerned about if you're taking a look at him.
Yeah, for sure. The injury risk is there with a lot of these guys. You definitely got to build that into account when you're looking to draft a lot of these guys. But yeah, Mete, let me get to you. I guess who's your number 10?
For number 10, I went with Buddy Hield. He's a great 3-point shooter, but he's coming off a rough season last year. But I think he can have a bounce back year for sure. He's pretty much solid all across the board except for blocks and field goal percentage, but his efficiency is usually really good. But like I said, he had a rough season last year, and if you're basing it off last year, he definitely has to have a better field goal percentage.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like that as a 3-point specialist, a lot of times you're just taking a lot of shots and it's going to tank your field goal a little bit. But yeah, other than that, he's definitely a guy who should bounce back next season. For number 10, I put Lonzo Ball. I know I didn't include him in point guard, so I have him here as he is eligible for shooting guard. Yeah, in this new offense in Chicago, it should open a lot of opportunity for him to, get a lot of assists. He gets a lot of rebounds for guards as it is, so he's going to be pretty close to the triple-double range. If he can just get 10 points a night, I think you're satisfied with him in terms of category league fantasy. Yeah, and then he does all the other defensive stuff, whether it's steals, whether it's blocks, all that stuff. So you're getting pretty much that whole package with Lonzo. When it comes to his percentages, obviously he has been improving, so that's definitely something that you can feel a little bit better about when it comes to Lonzo. So yeah, I definitely take a look at him for shooting guard for fantasy. But Nate, let me get to you. Number 11, which player do you have?
I guess for number 11, I have RJ Barrett. He is 8th in total points. I guess the concern for RJ Barrett is going to be how good the New York Knicks are. They added Kemba Walker. I see that it looks like they have Evan Fournier as well. They have Julius Randle. So there's a lot of players who can score on this team. So I'm just not sure how many field goal attempts that RJ Barrett's going to have this season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I didn't include any Knicks on this list for that reason, just because it's pretty muddy when it comes to their guards. They're in New York, so yeah, it's going to be really tough. But yeah, like you said, if RJ Barrett can sort of separate himself from the pack, he's definitely going to be a really solid fantasy player this year. Mete, getting to you, which player do you have at 11?
I went with Drew Holiday at 11, the number 3 guy in Milwaukee, but he's one of the better defenders in the league, and he'll give you great steals and blocks numbers. outside of those two categories, he isn't particularly great at other categories, but he's really solid and there isn't much to complain about. He's not really weak in one category, I'd say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you said. Yeah, Drew Holiday, he's that guy, you need to round out your lineup. You need a guy to cover those categories that your main guys don't. He's definitely that player to look at, maybe fifth, sixth round around there. You definitely want to take a look at him for sure. For number 11, I have Karis LeVert. I believe Nate, you mentioned him, how he hasn't stayed healthy. I believe if he stays healthy, he can be a lot higher than number 11 for me. Also in Indiana, it's tough to see who's really going to be that number 2 guy, whether it's going to be him or whether it's going to be Brogdon, because we haven't seen a lot of him yet. So he's very talented. You mentioned him in Brooklyn. He was really solid there. Coming to Indiana, we haven't really seen a full season of him. So I'd really be interested to see how he does for this coming season. But yeah, he definitely should be solid. So I have him at number 11. Let's get to number 12 now. Nate, let me get to you. Who's your 12th shooting guard?
I guess my 12th shooting guard is Buddy Hield. He was first in 3 points made this past season for shooting guards, and he was ninth in total points as well. I think the only thing I'm wondering about is he played a lot of games, which is good, but on the other hand, I'm not sure. Like if you looked at the potential of like every single player, I'm not sure if Buddy Hield would have the same potential as people that I ranked higher than him if they're all fully healthy.
Yeah, I understand that. He definitely struggled last year. He's definitely more of that 3-point specialist. I don't know how solid he is in covering all the other categories, but he definitely is a good player to be drafting, especially for threes. I guess for my number 12, I'm going to go with D'Angelo Russell. And I agree with pretty much everything Mete said about that. I actually expect this Minnesota offense to get better. So I think that's why I have him. Obviously, for Anthony Edwards, I don't have him because I consider him at the 3, but he can play both positions, so he's fine to draft there for fantasy. But yeah, D'Angelo Russell, he's definitely going to sort of have that bounce back in my mind that I think people that had him last season were really disappointed with. Yeah, that, like I said, the Minnesota offense should be better, so I think he should be really solid. But I guess, Mete, I'll get to you for your number 12.
For number 12, I went with Marcus Smart. I think with the departure of Kemba, Marcus Smart could become the starting point guard for the Boston Celtics, and I think that would be huge for his fantasy value. He didn't have the greatest field goal percentage and rebounds numbers, but his other category numbers were really solid.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy I had in consideration. Like, I mean, I'll just get to, I guess, some of my sleeper players, and he was definitely one of those guys that I looked at, just players that are like really strong all around fantasy players. Like, I believe he led the league in steals before. He's definitely one of those guys that he can shoot the 3 as well. So you're getting a lot of those categories that, you draft specialists for, but if you get a guy later down in your draft that can cover all those, then you definitely want to take advantage of that. But I guess starting with you, Nate, I guess which other guys did you sort of have as sleepers or you didn't really include in your list?
There were a few guys that I didn't include on my list. I didn't include LaMelo Ball. He's really good, but I saw him listed as point guard on some sites, so I decided to not put him in. Oladipo, he's another player that could be top 12. It's just that he was injured for the past few years, so we didn't get to see his full potential, and now he's going to be on Miami, and there's a lot of really good players on Miami, like Lowry, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo. So not really too sure what his role is going to be on Miami as well. There's also Bogdan Bogdanovic, really good shooter, Gary Trent Jr., and Malik Beasley.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, some guys that you guys had, I mentioned Anthony Edwards. I would have him at 3. Someone mentioned Brogdon. I think that was you, Mete. I had him on my point guards list, so I didn't include him here. Yeah, there were just a few other guys that I just didn't feel like should make my top 12. Obviously, they're really solid as well. Even other guys like Fred Van Vliet, some people have him at the 2, but I had him on my point guards list as well. There's just different other players that are going to be solid. Halliburton as well was another guy I didn't include because he can either play the 1 or the 2. Yeah, so I guess Mete, did you have any sleepers or I guess players that you left off your list?
Yeah, one I left off my list was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He'd easily make this list, but I decided not to use him again as I used him for point guards. And for 2 sleepers, I feel like DeJounte Murray could have a monster year. Even though he's not a traditional point guard, he's definitely got shooting guard eligibility. So with the departure of DeRozan, I think there's a lot of shots that could be going his way this season. So definitely a guy I think that can break out. And Colin Sexton, another guy who's not a traditional shooting guard per se, but I think he's also really solid. He's a great scorer, but outside of that, he's not too good. That's why I decided to leave him out.
Yeah, Sexton was another guy I was looking at. I guess I just didn't feel as confident about him compared to some of the other guys I had in my top 12, but he was definitely someone that went into consideration for that as well. I guess in terms of shooting guards, a lot of the point guards in fantasy do have shooting guard eligibility. So definitely don't be afraid to draft multiple point guards that have that eligibility if you consider them better than a lot of the players that we have on this list. So point guard seems to be the stronger position. I think you guys could probably agree with that in terms of fantasy. There are some good shooting guards, like we mentioned, that are traditional shooting guards. But yeah, the good part about fantasy is most players in basketball play multiple positions. So it's a good thing. You can stack up with a lot of these guys. You can shift them around. There's utility spots as well. You can throw them into. There's also single guard positions as well. So those are definitely really solid for fantasy. And I guess Nate, I'll just get to you first. Any last thoughts?
I feel like shooting guard is kind of like a mixed bag, if that makes sense. Like there's a lot of good shooting guards, but I'm not too sure how deep shooting guards go this year.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit deeper. I know we talked last week about power forwards. That seems to be the weakest position when it comes to finding like single power forward players for fantasy. I know a lot of the centers have that power forward eligibility, which sort of makes up for it. And I think the same thing for shooting guard. You get some of the forwards and some of the point guards that have shooting guard eligibility. So it can sort of make up, that deficit in your lineup. But I guess Mete, do you have any last thoughts?
Like you said, I definitely think shooting guard is thinner than point guard, but I kind of noticed that I feel like all these shooting guards are really good at scoring, but outside of that, they give you solid numbers, but nothing too elite. If that makes any sense. I think most of these guys are really elite scorers, but outside of that, it's just like 4 or 5 assists, rebounds a game, couple steals, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, shooting guard seems to be a position that's it's a bit better in terms of points leagues, but I guess it thins out in terms of like 9 category traditional leagues. So definitely if you're in a 9 category league, that might be a position you want to prioritize more. Especially if you don't have a league that allows dual eligibility, then you pretty much really got to take guys like Bradley Beal early. We mentioned Zach LaVine. I think someone mentioned James Harden. I think that was you, Nate. If he has shooting guard eligibility, he's another guy that can score a lot of points. So obviously your drafting strategy is different, whether you're in a category or a points league. So you definitely got to take that into consideration. I know next week, I believe we're covering small forwards, and then we'll probably get right into division previews and mock drafts. So I think we have a pretty good remaining off season ahead. And yeah, I think we'll have a lot of good episodes to get to. So I think this is going to be the end of Big Time Basketball for this week. Make sure you check us out on Instagram and Twitter at FanFanPodcasts. We're definitely going to be starting football picks next week, so make sure you check us out there. This podcast is going to be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, hit the bell for notifications on YouTube, leave us a review, all that good stuff. And guys, This was a great episode, ranking out all the shooting guards, getting to all the news, and we'll talk to you guys on the next episode.